And now,
it's 10 a.m.
Let's just get down to it.
And it's time for your sports fix.
Strap yourselves in, folks.
From two guys who have covered the teams you're passionate about for years.
We are professionals.
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
This is my recital. I think it's very vital to rock around. That's right, on time. It's tricky. Here we go. It's tricky to rock around, to rock around. That's right, on time. It's tricky. It's tricky. It's tricky.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. I see 20 fingers in this studio. I see another 10 on Christian, so everyone had a good 4th of July, I'm assuming.
Yeah, great.
Jake Hatch filling in for Jake Scott again today. Jake will be back with us on Monday. Jake.
One of my favorite tweets I see every year, like on the 3rd of July, is somebody celebrating their final evening with a digit or two on their person. So, yeah, be safe out there, but good holiday overall.
And then we got the 24th, so let's not start counting our fingers yet.
That's very true.
Coming up today, 11 o'clock, we're going to be talking to Tim LaComb. He's going to join us, giving us a breakdown on what he feels like he's seen so far in NBA free agency, what he still thinks the Jazz have to do. Tim, obviously, extremely well plugged in. Mm-hmm. And then Keith Smith will join us from Spotrac coming up at 11:30. He's had some breakdown on the Lauri Markkanen front, which I think is where we can talk as well. It's just been the big conversation. And Lauri Markkanen is the last large piece, I think, that is really being talked about in the NBA. And, DeMar DeRozan's out there, and there's some, Tyus Jones and Miles Bridges, depending on what you think of Miles Bridges.
Sure.
There are some pieces out there that could potentially move the needle for some teams. But I think the last real major piece that teams are hoping springs free is Lauri Markkanen.
Well, and that's the thing about it is he is the most, how do I say this? Like, he's the most impactful remaining guy out there. Because DeMar DeRozan's a good player, but we're talking to Lauri Markkanen, where you and I have talked about this. He's a fringe all NBA guy.
Right.
And so getting a guy of that caliber, there are going to be a lot of franchises who have interest. Zach Lowe this morning saying that the Miami Heat are somewhat into the mix here, along with Sacramento. And if you're Danny Ainge, you're sitting over there fielding phone calls, him and Justin Zanuck, saying, okay, what are all you willing to pony up, and then starting to leverage against each other?
The fact that a deal hasn't gotten done tells me two things.
Okay.
One, the Jazz aren't that motivated to trade him. If they were motivated, they could have moved him.
I agree.
There are packages out there to move him. Second, the Jazz have set an enormously high price for him. Mm-hmm. And that's what you should do. When you don't have to sell anything, you don't have to sell your car, you don't have to sell your house, but if somebody comes along and says, hey, I'll give you 20% above asking, okay, you'll listen to it. You've just got to. That's responsible. And, you look at all these teams that have slowly let their teams fall apart. Like Golden State is a good example where, truthfully, loyalty has hurt them, and they should have traded Steph by now, and they probably should have traded Clay earlier and said, yeah, we got our title in 2022 when we realized in 2023 it wasn't going to work, and we shipped those guys out. And we got a boatload of draft picks, and we started over, and now we're in a really advantageous spot moving forward, and they're not going to do it, and that's fine. I get it.
Sure.
You want to keep your fan base happy. It'd be hard to see Steph playing somewhere else, though 3 years from now, 4 years from now, when you have all these draft picks, you'd be happy about it.
Yeah.
But so the Jazz aren't in a spot where they feel like they have to trade Lauri, and they don't. And everybody I've talked to, including people in the Jazz front office, the plan all along has been to re-sign Lauri. Extend him, re-sign him. That's all I've been told for 2 years from everybody I've talked to. People who would know what the plan is, what the actual plan is. I've written it a bunch of times. We've talked about it on the air a bunch of times. And at 7 feet tall, with those types of shooting percentages, he's the type of guy that it doesn't matter who you draft this year or next year or the year after that, he will fit next to them. But you ask the world for that guy, and if the deal doesn't get met, you're just fine with it. The Jazz aren't harmed next year by having Lauri Markkanen on the roster, and I certainly don't think he takes you out of the Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey, BJ Edgecombe conversation now that is popping up for next year's draft.
Yes, and I agree with that assessment of it. But the other thing about this is we know Danny Ainge. He is one of the most patient front office executives in the NBA when it comes to getting his deal. He will sit back, and you're right. They're not scrambling to move Lauri. I completely agree with you, and everything I've heard is that, there are teams who are interested, but the Jazz are going to sit back, they're going to let things ride, and it screams, look back at what happened with the Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert deals. Danny sat back until he got the quote-unquote Godfather offer and said, okay, done, let's go.
Yeah.
And they don't have to move Lauri right now. The extension can be signed in early August. I think it's like August 6th. Yeah, is when it can be triggered. Okay, great. They can sit back and just kind of let this thing ride and wait until these teams really pony up to the level that Danny's like, all right, we're good, moving. Or if not, you're right. He is that type of player that, yeah, let's say you get a Cooper Flagg, an Ace Bailey, any of those guys in next year's draft, he'd fit right alongside them. He is very versatile in that way.
He doesn't need the ball. And that's the nice thing about him. He rarely needs the ball. He needs to catch it and shoot it, but he doesn't need to dribble. Mm-hmm. He doesn't pass a whole lot. That's one of his weaknesses. But yeah, he just doesn't need the ball in his hands to A, be happy, or B, be productive. And that's the real, that's a star type of player. I mean, that's what Klay Thompson was in his prime. Now, Lowry's not the defensive player that Klay was, but Klay rarely dribbled. Famously the 37-point quarter, he had like 7 dribbles or something crazy.
It was an insanely, because it was all catch and shoot stuff.
Yeah.
And he was just and that's one thing I love about Lauri is when he is on, you let him go.
Yeah.
Let it ride. But I look at this and there are people out there so this goes back to Tuesday night, I believe. The rumors were very strong about the Golden State thing. So I started reaching out to some people out in the Bay Area and part of it was to get people on DJ and PK, as I do, I book guests. And 2 of them said, hey, there's legit legs to this, and I'm hesitant to come on because, and we just started going back and forth on stuff. And Golden State's whole thing is, and you were talking about this DJ between shows, is that Golden State's offers, like what they can offer up, you look at it and say, okay, if you give all of that, sure, but how much are they willing to part? And that's the debate here is, these other teams, what does Sacramento have? Okay, Sacramento's got some players. What does Miami? You look at each one. They're going to have to give up a significant level of picks and players. I'm not saying and or. It's a mixture of both.
Yeah.
To get the Jazz to agree to this.
And that's an advantageous spot that the Jazz are in.
It's great.
And the nice thing is Lauri wants to be here. And I guess the downside for the Jazz is that you don't want to dangle Lauri too long and make him feel like he's unwanted.
Sure.
Now, the problem is Lauri can't sign this deal for another month. A month from tomorrow, he can't sign the deal until then. So the Jazz will do their due diligence, and I would imagine would get a deal done pretty quickly on August 6th if it's there. Now, they don't have to. The other thing is the Jazz, if they really want to, they don't have to sign him on August 6th. They can continue to wait and wait and wait, and you can sign his extension, and the big part of this is that they renegotiate his contract for next year.
Correct.
Which you can renegotiate contracts in the NBA if you pay more. You can't renegotiate down. You can renegotiate up.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing about this is the Jazz, based on how things are looking right now, Ben, they're going to have to hit the salary floor. And the way to fill up a bunch of that room is to renegotiate, give Lauri some extra money this year, essentially front load his next deal with part of that coming in potentially what would have been the final year of the deal. But you're right. It's super advantageous to be in the position the Jazz in because they are in no way, shape, or form pressured to do anything right now. And they can just sit back and let these other teams say, we'll offer this. Well, okay, they're offering that. What do you want? It's an auction.
Yep.
You sit back and you let it ride. And then when you finally see, okay, that's the one we want, you pick it and go.
And I will tell you, I suspect the Jazz have very firmly set a price.
I would agree.
Knowing, and I've talked to Justin Zanuck about how he makes trades and what he likes to do and what he doesn't like to do. And he has told me he hates when teams call up and are just like, well, what do you think about something like this? And it's like, give me your final asking price or give me your final offer and we will start there. I'm not going to do the let's start low and slowly add pieces and let me dig through everything you have and see if I can find a second round pick somewhere in the future. I've been told by him specifically, he hates that. He hates when teams do that.
Well, I think a lot of us, okay, you say the price is $20. And somebody calls you up, well, what if I give you 12? And you're like, no, 20.
It's 20.
And they're like, well, 15. Nope. It gets annoying because you keep haggling. It's a waste of time, everybody's time when you do that.
And look, it kind of goes back to what the Jazz did with Donovan Mitchell, which I had heard what the offer was for Donovan. I think they ended up trading him on a Wednesday or something.
Yeah, it was.
I think the Friday before I had heard what this offer was, and it was Colin, and it was Lauri, and it was their first round pick, who at the time I didn't realize was Ochai Agbaji.
Sure. Yeah.
And all the picks they could offer.
Yeah.
and that the Jazz had turned it down, essentially. And the Jazz had said, that's your offer, that's fine. We're going to turn our attention towards the Knicks and see what the Knicks are if they're going to match this price finally that they've asked, that the Jazz have asked.
Yeah.
And the Knicks didn't do it, and the Jazz went back to Cleveland. It wasn't like, from my understanding, Cleveland upped their offer after the Friday when Cleveland apparently said, we're walking away from the deal, and the Jazz said, fine, we'll turn our attention to the Knicks.
Okay.
That was the deal. That was the final deal. It wasn't like Cleveland went over the top to beat anybody in some bidding or some auction like you're talking about. And I suspect they've done the same thing for all these teams. I'm sure they've gone to Sacramento and said, well, it's these 4 picks and these 2 players. And they've gone to San Antonio and said, it's these 4 picks and these 2 players. Okay. And they've gone to Golden State, who only has kind of 2 tradable draft picks. They have another one which they can pull some protections off and trade as well, and some pick swaps. But I'm sure they have said, no, it's Jonathan Kuminga, it's Brandon Pajemski, it's all your first-round picks, and it's all your swaps.
Hey.
And that's just what it is, and we're not going to come down from it because there's no timetable with Lauri. Lauri will sign an extension because nobody's turning down extensions right now. Now, ironically, Paul George did, but even Donovan Mitchell signed an extension in Cleveland, and the Jazz recognize that that's what agents across the NBA are telling all of their players: sign the extension. If we have to get you out of the situation later, we can, but sign the extension. And he's only set to make $18 million next year, only. But the Jazz, because they've maintained all this cap room that they have, like you're talking about, still over $35 million, they can shave 12 of that off, give it to Lauri, bump him up from $18 million to $30 million next year, which is better than just saying, like, hey, we'll wait to sign you next offseason. They're throwing an extra 12 to however much they want, $15 million on top of that deal that they could offer next year in this extension by renegotiating and giving him more money now. And that's really advantageous for him because, again, he's adding $15 million to his pocket by this time next year. So that's the value there and the real edge that the Jazz have, and still why I think he's going to end up in Salt Lake. I think Lauri is going to stay. I could be wrong. Someone could ultimately make that deal and match what the Jazz asking price is. But I suspect the Jazz aren't playing games with anybody. I think Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck have set this price. And if someone meets it before August 6th, great. And if they don't, then the Jazz will say, fine, we'll sign him, we'll keep him, we'll be happy.
Well, that's the other thing about Danny Ainge is I know some people who know Danny, and they said he can be hard-headed to a fault. And he's probably, in his mind, you're right, he's probably got, and it's the same with Justin Zanuck, they've got the price that they're willing to move on from Lauri from, and they're not going to budge off of it. And that, if it comes to it, where one of these teams blinks first and says, yeah, okay, we'll give it to you. Then they say, okay, great, let's move along here. But the thing is, the Jazz have every card in their hand right now. They can keep him, they can extend him, they can trade, they can do everything they want and still move forward with positive outcomes. It feels like in every scenario. So I look at this as this is exactly what the situation you want to be in. You don't want to be being held hostage by the player, obviously, because they were worried about that potentially with Donovan Mitchell when they moved him.
Sure. But
the Donovan Mitchell thing where he extends to only 3 years, I'm seeing people out there crowing, well, see, they pulled through and got him, and I'm sitting in my back of my mind, I'm like, okay, you got him for 3 years and a player option on the 3rd year. You've got him for 2 years, and he could leverage himself out real. So the bigger point to be made here is the Jazz hold all the cards right now. They can sit back and no matter what the outcome ultimately is, if Lauri is here come October when training camp begins or if he's elsewhere, they had a positive outcome regardless.
Yep, and I think the Jazz are going to feel that way. I think the Jazz are going to go into next year feeling like they won the offseason, which I think a lot of Jazz fans would roll their eyes at right now because they've signed Drew Eubanks for 2 years and $10 million, which is the funniest signing anyone's made this summer so far.
We had a sign this morning, Tavion
Kinsey.
Yeah, Kinsey. He's a two-way player. But
has been with the G League team.
Yeah, I just saw somebody tag that. Big game hunt. I'm like, okay, I got it. I get it.
And that comment is going to haunt Danny for a while. And look, it's not going to haunt Danny. It's going to hang over the Jazz.
Yes.
Danny's not going to lose any sleep over that comment because he's going to say, well, we were.
Yeah.
We tried to get Mikal Bridges, and we're going to hope to, appeal to Paul George or whatever it was.
We're going to get Mikal, and we're going to leverage it and try and get Paul to come in. And guess what? Had they pulled that off, we'd be all over this on radio, and the fans would be all over social media crowing, they pulled it off. They did go big game hunting. And now you have a trio. It would have been a trio of Mikal Bridges, Paul George, and Lauri Markkanen, who are 3 very positionless players, which is exactly what the modern NBA demands.
No, they didn't.
Yeah, they didn't.
And they ended up with Drew Eubanks instead. So that's a change.
But you read the full quote when we did the show together on Tuesday. You read the full quote, and it says, we get to July, things may change. Well, things have changed.
Yep. And the Jazz are now positioning themselves in this interesting spot, which one of the reasons they haven't spent their money just to spend it is because they are keeping money free to extend Lauri if it gets to that date.
Yeah.
That is always going to be in the back pocket. And it's why this number, $37 million or whatever that's floating around for the Jazz, is a little bit deceptive.
Yeah.
Because I promise you, 15 of that they're going to keep in their back pocket.
They've earmarked a certain amount, yeah.
For Lauri for this extension. Like whatever they have to do to get to that number that they're really confident Lauri's going to love and renegotiate and then sign the extension. They will keep some of that put away and not spend until the day comes where either Lauri's been traded or they can extend him. I also think Danny Ainge likes the idea of being the last man standing. And there is value to that, not because, the Jazz are going to sign Gary Trent Jr. and Tyus Jones and all these other guys to minimum contracts because they have nowhere else to go.
Sure.
Now, I guess that's technically possible, but really I think Danny Ainge likes the idea of a team getting to August, September, something going wrong, player asking out, a team says, we need to make some changes. We don't like the landscape of the NBA, and we need to find somebody with some flexibility that can bail us out.
Sure.
And Danny can essentially offer a payday loan of, like a predatory help. Yeah. And be like, interesting. I do have the money you need to fix this problem that you have. Or I do have the roster space or the salary cap space to fix this problem that you're dealing with right now. I can help you.
Yeah.
There's a 50% daily interest on it. Or, the penalty essentially is a first-round pick. It's going to cost you to get out of these guys.
You make it worth your while to make it happen. Now,
but you don't have any other options, and you need it, and we will be there for you. And I think that's the Jazz are also setting themselves up to be in that situation, to maintain flexibility when all the other teams have exhausted theirs, because that does make you not an ideal trading partner, but the only trading partner, and that has a lot of leverage as well.
Well, so I remember the Donovan Mitchell deal went down in September. It was actually September 1st, 2022. Going exactly to your point here, Ben. You can sit back and, as you mentioned, be kind of the last man standing. All of a sudden, the team is like, you know what? We need to do something. And all of a sudden, they're calling up the Utah Jazz, and Danny's over like, yeah, okay, so here are the terms and how things are going to proceed here. And they're like, fine, whatever, we'll do it. And that is a very good spot. And now the other part is, if you go out and get some of these veterans that are probably still remaining they're looking for an opportunity, Ben, and you sign them and bring them to Utah, well, guess what? Come February, when teams are looking for pieces to add for a stretch run, they may turn back right to you as well. So it's both a short and long-term play relative to all this that help the Jazz out no matter which way you construe it. Now, to your point, Jazz fans, yeah, they're upset because this is a franchise that, if you're of a certain age, it was just routine. They went to the playoffs every single year. They were a top 6 seed. They just did their thing. And to consider a protracted rebuild with this franchise to get back to that level, it irks people.
Yep. And the fact that it could be 2 more years.
Yeah.
I mean, realistically, depending on how the Jazz play this, I know everyone kind of thinks, you get Lauri. If you keep Lauri, and I think this is actually right, if you keep Lauri and you draft Cooper Flag or whatever, one of these guys next year. We're just using Cooper Flag as the
because he's the grand prize.
The variable though in this conversation, the placeholder of you draft the guy who you think is going to be one of the two or the face of your franchise going forward. Then you exit the rebuild. Very realistically, regardless of what the Jazz do with Lauri this year, like let's assume he resigns, they could be having a conversation to trade him again a year from now, tank again for the Cam Boozer draft. Yeah. Then you have this guy this year, whoever that guy is next year, and all of these assets you've gotten from Lauri Markkanen.
Correct.
All of those things, I think, remain on the table. Now, the nice thing is if you have Lauri, you could say, you did get Cooper Flag. Cooper's good enough.
Yeah.
If you keep Lauri, now you can start building, and you've got some cap space, and now you can go add pieces and start trying to win right away. You have maintained this flexibility that you haven't painted yourself in a corner as far as what you've got to do. And these young players that you have right now in your salary, you're not getting close to any of them A, needing to sign their first contract extension, and B, none of them look like they're going to be max players right now. Now, that could easily change, but that clock is just not ticking. The way some bad teams, like the Detroit Pistons, have now already given Cade Cunningham a 1 year or his rookie extension for the max deal, and it's like you have painted yourself in a corner with a team who can't win, doesn't really have upside to improve unless some of these young rookies hit. And so far, the young rookies have been okay, or their young players have been okay, but haven't turned into stars, and nobody wants to sign there in free agency. That's the realistic part of if you wait too long to add pieces, you can find yourself in trouble, or if you draft poorly.
And then the whole notion of Salt Lake being a place where guys don't want to play would only be emboldened at that point, and that you want to avoid that obviously because let's be honest, Brian Smith's been unabashed in saying that he wants Utah to be a destination. It takes, obviously, you have to be able to prove to agents and players themselves you can develop here, you can become stars here. And I think the Jazz got a fairly good track record. Like, look at Donovan Mitchell, look at Gordon Hayward. Push it back even further, Darren Williams. Like, you can come here and have success. But the bigger point to be made is, yes, you can't let it stagnate. You've got to stay on the front foot at all times. And it looks like the Jazz are doing exactly that. They're keeping all their options available. They got a just incredible set of assets to use, picks, pick swaps, all that if they'd ever decide that they need to push all in, Ben, maybe they find an answer. And they say, you know what, we need to push in. They've got the pieces to push all in on that. And that's the best spot to be in.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, top 3 stories at KSLSports.com. Stick around. More Jake and Ben coming up next. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
It's time to break down the biggest stories of the day. This is the top 3 stories of the day on KSLSports.com. On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Happy July 5th. Hope everybody had a great holiday. Mine was very enjoyable. Hatch, sounded like you had a good time as well.
Great time. The family and ate some hot dogs. By the way, have you ever had, so you know Johnsonville brats? Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's a new flavor, but it's a queso flavored one.
Oh, okay.
Like, I love the better with cheddar and everything, but queso flavor. That was really, really good. Anyways.
I didn't down a single hot dog.
What?
Un-American to me.
What'd you have?
I didn't have burgers or hot dogs. Christian, you have a dog?
Me neither. My
Carne
wife
asada,
worked Wednesday night into Thursday morning.
Okay.
By the time she got up, got ready,
She's a
we
nurse,
got over.
right?
Yeah, she's a nurse.
Yeah.
By the time we got to like our friend's house for the festivities, they had already eaten and stuff.
Yeah.
So I missed out on all the grilling action too.
Okay.
I can't remember what I ate now. Chicken salad. That's what I had. Chicken salad. Hey, nominate the youth sports volunteer that you know for the Hercules Hero of the Week. Submit your nomination at KSLSports.com/contest and listen every Thursday afternoon to JJ and Alex for the winner. Help us celebrate the effects of those volunteers making an impact with the Hercules Hero of the Week. Sponsored by Hercules Credit Union. Also had some ribs. So, I mean, I had some summer food.
I was going to say, if you're not going to have a dog or a burger, ribs and chicken salad sounds pretty dang awesome.
All right, let's get to the top 3 stories at KSLSports.com, brought to you by our friends at J. Brooks Jewelers. You can go find them online, jbrooksjewelers.com, or 2 locations up and down the Wasatch Front to fit all your jewelry needs. Christian, it's number 1.
Number 1, Joe Ingles lands in Minnesota.
Not surprising that Orlando didn't pick up his $11 million team option for year 2. He is barely an NBA player anymore. He is a adult sometimes in the locker room. He's an elder figure in the locker room.
And that's what he was brought in to do it in Orlando. Because remember, Orlando had a super, super young roster. We had him on when he signed with Orlando with DJ and PK, and he came out and he's like, yeah, I'm hanging out with a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
But he wasn't deriding them. He's just like, it's just part of the deal. He goes to Minnesota now, and he's going to be able to be that guy who is whooping it up on the bench. And if you need him in a circumstance to come in and hoist up some threes from the corner, he can do that. Because you're right, he is fringe NBA player at this point. But the thing is, as PK pointed out this morning, I will add, he has gotten 11 years out of the NBA without even stepping foot in the NBA until he was in his upper 20s. That is a mark of an incredible run.
He is. I went back. He came in at number 25 on our 50 greatest players in Utah Jazz history list. And I was just kind of reading back over some of his accolades when I saw that he wrote this and used some of that info in the article that we wrote about him signing in Minnesota. It's like, hey, he really is one of the great success stories in Jazz history. And, of course, you look at John and Carl. Carl was expected to be very good. John was a surprise with how good he was. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying Joe Ingles next in line. Rudy Gobert has obviously far surpassed that. Donovan Mitchell has surpassed that. But you're talking about a guy who was truly a scrap heap pickup.
Yes.
The Clippers said they didn't want to waive him. Yeah. Okay, but they did. You probably never want to waive anybody, but he wasn't good enough to make the top 15 players on your roster.
Yeah, and his now wife, Renee, was on a plane from Australia to the States. She lands in L.A., and he's like, oh, by the way, we ain't sticking it here in L.A. We're going to Salt Lake City, Utah. And she's like, where in the...
Yeah.
Where's Utah?
Right. But he stepped in.
Yeah.
By the end of his first season, he was kind of in the rotation. Year 2, he was really solidly in the rotation. Year 3, he signs an extension, if I remember how it worked.
Yeah.
And then was just a staple and was a killer. Finished number 2 in Sixth Man of the Year voting, only behind Jordan Clarkson the year. And a lot of people thought Joe actually should have won it, but was a killer. And is, again, to the point where he came in at number 25 on the list of Jazz 50 greatest players. He's a major, major piece in Jazz history, and followed it up with a better than expected rehab stint in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Turned it into an $11 million deal in Orlando, and what I would suspect would be his last year this year in the NBA with the Minnesota Timberwolves, trying to chase a ring, and hanging out with his old buddies again.
Yeah, he gets to reunite with Rudy and Mike, 2 guys he famously got along with,
Yep.
by the way. And I'm happy for him. Joe missed maybe no more than 10 times in 8 seasons of weekly check-ins with DJ and PK during the NBA season. I don't know how many people realize how rare that is to have that happen, but he ingratiated himself to this community. He made an incredible amount of money compared to what he probably would have expected when he showed up to the training camp with the LA Clippers team back in the day. But he has been one of the feel-good stories in recent memory in the NBA, and hats off to him. Another year in the NBA to collect a check, obviously. It's a great way, I think, to go out.
Well, and again, I know he's stepping in kind of to replace Kyle Anderson.
Kind of, but...
And I think Monty Morris was on that team last year and
Yes.
just signed with the Suns. So they need some help. They're going to turn to the rookie that they just drafted with their top 10 pick to rely on that, Rob Dillingham, as kind of their backup guard. Joe's going to step in and do some things here and there. He's really not capable of doing a whole lot, and he doesn't move very well, so he's terrible defensively now.
And Minnesota likes to run a lot of pick and rolls, and Joe's knowledge of how Rudy likes things will work in that circumstance. You're right. He was never the best defensive player at any point during his run here in Utah, even. But he'll be able to do things that will help them win. It's going to be in smaller doses than many might expect.
And good for him, hanging out one more year. And we'll see. Maybe Minnesota's mature enough now and adds another older player to actually make a run at the title. They're certainly as talented as anybody in the West. And if Ant takes another leap, which is certainly within his capabilities, they can challenge Oklahoma City. They can challenge Dallas to win the West. Certainly they have that type of talent, and maybe Joe helps push them a little bit closer. All right, number 2.
Number 2, Utah Hockey Club will have a scrimmage today at 1.
Doors open at noon over at the Delta Center. 1 o'clock. They're playing 4-on-4, not your typical. Now, 4-on-4 in hockey, I don't know if does that include the goaltender or not? Do we know?
Guess we'll find out.
Because there's 5 skaters and then your goaltender.
Yeah.
So technically it's 6-on-6. Are we doing 3-on-3 and a goaltender?
Well, the 3-on-3 format is the All-Star format they have in NHL now, where they play, and it's got a goalkeeper and with 3-on-3 on actually skating. So I don't know. Now I'm with Christian. We're going to find out together. But I'm planning on wandering over to see at least a little bit of it after the show wraps up today. I think the cool part about this is it's really the first on ice. Okay, so
what does that mean? Yeah, it's 3-on-3. That's
3-on-3.
So three skaters.
Yes.
Okay.
And a goaltender.
Yep.
Okay, so it's the All-Star format. If you ever watched the NHL All-Star game the last 2 to 3 seasons, they've altered it now where it's 3-man. And
increases speed, increases goal scoring.
And if you want to use the rugby example, 15-a-side rugby versus rugby sevens, it's faster, it moves quicker, so that's the idea of it. So I'm looking forward to this first extensive real on ice thing that a hockey fan here in Utah can see. Now, they are the young players. You will see Ginla, Tej Ginla, like those young players. It's none of the vets. So it's all the young kids finishing up this prospects camp, but it's still an opportunity to see them on the ice.
It's like watching the Jazz Summer League rosters.
Absolutely,
scrimmage against itself.
Yeah, sure.
So that'll be very cool. This is from the release from the Utah Hockey Club. All 11 of their 2024 draft picks, including Tej Ginla and Cole Baudouin, will be there. Last year's first-round picks, Maverick Lamoureux from 2022 and Dmitry Simashev from last year, who apparently has had a great camp so far and may end up ending up on the roster next year, is going to be there as well. So very exciting. 32 players in total have been taking part in the this little camp that they've been doing over the last week up in Park City, and then are coming down today, starting at 1 o'clock. Again, doors open at noon for this scrimmage. These are the types of cool events that we're just going to have to get used to being a part of the summer schedule.
Yeah.
And this is not the only time they're going to do this. This is something you do consistently every year. It's not a true summer league. Now, there are some tournaments that apparently some teams have hosted.
Yeah, we had Jay Stevens explain that. He said that they had one with the LA, Anaheim, Phoenix, and San Jose for a time had one. I think it'd be pretty cool to have something like that. Get something with maybe Vegas, Colorado, Utah. Like, just get in with them, and you build the Rocky Mountain Review, for lack of a better term, for hockey here.
So I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to have this, again, continue to progress. And what's crazy is how quickly hockey's going to get here because the regular season starts on October 9th. So their training camp's going to start in September. That's 2 months from now. Yeah, so we are not that far away from true NHL hockey kicking off, and today's a real chance to see it at the Delta Center.
Yeah, stop on by. It'll be really, really fun. And I've watched the NHL All-Star Game, those 3-on-3 formats. It's flying up and down the ice. It's actually really fun in that format. Oh, yeah. Well, that's a good point, Christian. It is free. So don't have to pay. Come down to the Delta Center. Doors open at noon. Hang out. Watch some hockey. Seems like a pretty good Friday to me.
Number 3,
Lauri Markkanen trade rumors continue to swirl.
That's been going on. I would keep an eye on the Jazz making other moves, too. I mean, I know that's kind of the big conversation at this point. Ian Begley yesterday, who covers the Knicks, and he covers kind of all of the NBA, but covers the Knicks, had mentioned that they have interest in Walker Kessler. They've got future first-round draft picks that they could offer. While we think everything's going to revolve around the Lauri Markkanen deal, like, the Jazz could do a lot of things. The Jazz still have a lot of freedom. There's still free agents out there to sign.
Yeah.
If they want to build out this roster however they want to, they've got all the opportunities to do it. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see other stuff happen before we get any news on Lauri, which maybe at the soonest is August 6th when he becomes eligible to sign that extension.
Well, and one name that has not been that prominent this summer, Ben, his name has been prominent for like the last 2 years, is Jordan Clarkson. Mm-hmm. He has still got value out there. I am actually, frankly, stunned that there has been a lack of news on anything involving him. That's, I guess, and that it could change today. Like all of a sudden the report could emerge, but he's kind of been the one name that I've been like looking at stuff. I'm like, why is his name not popped up?
One of the things that I thought was really interesting about Jordan, I think that's a fun name to talk about, is that he said last year at the end of the season, which I've asked him this before. I asked him 2 years ago, like, hey, what do you still want to accomplish before your career's over? Mm-hmm. And 2 years ago, he said, I don't think about it that way. He's like, I just live day to day. I don't think about my future.
Sure.
He essentially was not thinking about his basketball mortality. I asked him again at the end of last year, and he said, yeah, I'd like to win a title, and I want to win another Sixth Man of the Year award, which is pretty interesting because I think he recognizes he's not going to win a Sixth Man of the Year award in Utah. Pretty realistically, A, he may not be a sixth man, and second of all, you're probably not going to be a good enough team to warrant winning a Sixth Man of the Year award. I thought that was kind of a bigger conversation than we were able to really dive into with him. And I had asked him even at that point if he thought himself, could see himself coming back to Utah in his future. And he said, yeah, I want to come back when I'm retired and ride my motorcycle. Like he is starting to think big picture.
Yeah.
And while I don't think he's going to ask out, he's just a fabulous person. I could see, his agent and Jordan saying like, hey, I do want to win.
Yeah.
I recognize that's not the goal of the Jazz right now. And in fact, I probably hurt that. I will keep you afloat in enough games to, even if you're a replacement level player for the Jazz, that might be too good. The Jazz might want below replacement level players, which is what rookies are, which is what young players are out there getting opportunities. Right now, Bryce Sensabaugh is a below replacement level player.
Yes.
Isaiah Collier is a below replacement level player. So, yeah, maybe there is an opportunity where the Jazz say, hey, Jordan, for your sake, we don't need to hold you hostage asking for a future first-round draft pick or 3 seconds or whatever. Like, a team wants you. We want you to have success. We're really thrilled with what you came in and brought. And if we can get a trade exception back for you, there's value.
Give us. We just need to get something out of it because you want to avoid the situation the Golden State Warriors found themselves in, where they essentially salary dumped Jordan Poole and got nothing when Chris Paul ultimately was waived. I just look at it, and Jordan, he has been super patient.
Yep.
Well, quite honestly, more patient than most NBA players would have been with his situation here in Utah. And he and Joe's told me this as well. They got plans at some point to come back to Utah and drink beers together.
Yeah, absolutely. Like they're gonna. Jordan's time in Utah is not gone. In fact, I suspect as long as nothing crazy happens over the next 12 months at the longest.
Yeah.
And it doesn't totally sour the relationship. Like, he's going to be a long-term ambassador for the Jazz.
Yeah.
He's going to be a guy that I think, so far in his career, he's played his best basketball in Salt Lake City. The fans obviously love him. He will always be welcome back at the Delta Center and will be celebrated and get a standing ovation every time he comes back. And he travels well enough that I suspect he would swing through Salt Lake City and pop into Jazz games and be friendly with everybody. So I could see that happening. But I think you're right. I look at teams across the league and go to the Eastern Conference. The Celtics know, the Knicks know, but I could justify it for, and again, some of these teams just don't have the pieces to make a move.
Sure.
Milwaukee, Cleveland, Orlando, the Clippers. I don't think the Nuggets have the ability to do it, but there are a lot of teams in the NBA that would really benefit from Jordan Clarkson's skill set off the bench in spot situations.
Can I say something about Denver? I thought you were absolutely brilliant on the other day, by the way. You put out like your thoughts on free agency. They have been an absolute disaster class.
Yeah.
In terms of like what the moves they have made since that title. It is shocking how bad Denver has operated in the market overall.
They could really use Jordan.
Yeah, but you're right. They're hamstrung to the point where the Jazz are going to be like, you may want him, but you got nothing we want.
Nor do you have the ability to require him.
Exactly.
You can't take more money back, and you're not sending more money out.
So that's the thing is, Jordan can move, I think, to more than half the teams in the league and help them. The problem is the teams that may need him the most, like a Denver, may have hamstrung themselves to the point where they can't do it.
I don't know if I mentioned Philly. Philly would make a lot of sense for him.
Philly? That'd be interesting.
they've got all this cap space still that they can sign guys, and I know they've acquired Paul George, but yeah, you're just going to need more pieces. Their roster was so blank by the end of the year. The Heat would have made sense. They did just sign Alec Burks, who plays a somewhat similar role. So good for AB, still sticking around in the NBA. Crazy.
You want to talk about a guy who's carved out a nice long career for himself, AB. He's moved around a lot, but he has collected pretty good checks, and he's been a contributor. That's the best part about it.
All right, Tim LaComb's going to join us coming up at 11 o'clock. Keith Smith's going to join us at 11:30. A lot of Jazz talk still left in the show. Stick around. More coming up next. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
The sports you love, the teams you can't live without.
Get a sense of urgency!
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Very happy Friday to you. Coming up next Wednesday, first of all, we're going to be at Big 12 Media Day. Leaving Monday night, we'll be broadcasting live in Las Vegas Tuesday and Wednesday. So make sure and stay tuned to that all week next week. But including Wednesday, it's your chance to win big every week on the KSL Sports Zone with Win Ticket Wednesday. Listen to the KSL Sports Zone all day for your chance to win. The segment brought to you by our friends at Peach Doors and Windows. You can find them online, peachbuildingproducts.com, or go check out their showroom in Salt Lake City for all of your doors and windows needs. Before Big 12 Media Day, even because we have just had nonstop busy back-to-back-to-back weeks, the Salt Lake City Summer League kicks off, including Mr. Zach Edey making his NBA debut in Utah. And while I think a lot of people are excited about him going up against Walker Kessler, give me the real sicko matchup against Kenneth Lofton Jr. The two former Memphis Grizzlies, one former Memphis Grizzly and a current Memphis Grizzly in Zach Edey. This we've talked about this Jazz roster being absolutely stacked. It's going to be funny to watch how they play, especially when they go up against a behemoth like Zach Edey. And I mean behemoth on the floor, both literally due to his size and his production from the college level. He was quite awesome.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I just want to see, Kenneth Lofton Jr. manning up on.
Because they're close to the same weight.
Yeah.
Kenneth Lofton's 9 inches shorter.
I was going to say.
Well, have you seen pictures of Kenny?
He's svelte.
He's slimmed down a little bit.
Well, again, the funny thing is.
Did he do is it DJ Augustine? No, not DJ Augustine. DJ, who's the kid from
Burns.
NC State?
DJ Burns.
That slimmed down too,
Yeah.
It's funny to see Kenneth Lofton Jr. in real life and be like, okay, other than the fact that he is 6'7", he's a huge dude.
Yes.
He has built like so many people you know. Now, on the NBA, when he's going up against these guys who have 4% body fat, 6% body fat, all their muscles look like David Robinson, an old Ninja Turtles action figure. They're just so ripped. You're like, oh man, this guy's in terrible shape. You see him up in person, like he's not at all. But now he's in even better shape, and you have seen the videos come out. And look, I don't care about his ability to do a crossover in an unguarded gym and finishing a layup. It's absolutely about what he can do on the floor. But getting in shape is a big part of his career. If he wants to make it in the NBA, being in tip-top physical shape is going to be key for him, and that's one of the things I think we'll be watching Monday.
Well, and there's parameters. A lot of these contracts, guys have to meet certain benchmarks. It's more famous in the NFL, obviously, because the NFL will legitimately tell you have I've heard from NFL players, they have 4 pounds they can reside in. Like you have a 4-pound range. Like say it's 212 to 216 pounds. It's optimized for the NBA has stuff like that. It's not as necessarily as prevalent, probably in conversation, but Kenneth Lofton Jr., he's got to prove that he has the stamina and the ability to hang in a 48-minute game. And but the thing about it is you talk about this roster, they got options up and down the roster to kind of throw different lineups at people in the summer league. You want stacked summer league roster. I know that makes some people like, are you serious? But look who the Jazz are sending to summer league. Yeah,
it's all the rookies from last year: Bryce Sensabaugh, Taylor Hendricks, Keontae George, who would have been late Las Vegas Summer League MVP had he not gotten hurt. This year's 3 rookies: Cody Williams, Isaiah Collier, Kyle Filipowski, Darius Baisley, who's been in the NBA for 5 years, Kenneth Lofton Jr. Who am I missing?
Kessler.
Walker Kessler.
Kessler's on that
former all-rookie team
He's
player.
a third-year player who has played a lot of basketball in his first 2 seasons.
Tavion Kinsey, who the Jazz just signed to a 2-way deal.
They're going to be
Jason Preston, who was a former top 35 pick.
You can throw all kinds of lineups out there. And the nice part about it, do we know who the coach is for the summer league?
Sean Sheldon.
Sheldon's he's got to be sitting there like, I'm going to throw all kinds of lineups out there on this court. And the thing about it, I think the Jazz front office, they want to see all these guys in different looks to get a feel as much as you can from the summer league of who these guys are and how they fit.
I'll be curious how many games everyone ends up playing because, they're going to play 3 in Salt Lake. They're scheduled to play at least 5. 4 of them are already revealed in Vegas, and then everyone will play at least 1/5, a 5th game. I mean, there's a realistic chance Keontae plays 3.
Well, and
total.
And some of those guys could play here in Salt Lake and then be left off the Summer League Vegas roster.
Depending on how they play.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I will keep an eye on that. And then maybe you just say, hey, Keontae, you're just not playing Game 4. You're going to play Game 5, but you're not going to play Game 4. And Isaiah Collier's going to get a big opportunity.
Yeah.
And some of that might be, honestly, matchup dependent. Who's the other team have? You want Walker to go up against Zach Edey.
Yeah.
I think you want to see that. You want to test Walker. You want Walker to, fine-tune his skills a little bit in a game like this where, in all honesty, very famous in Jazz lore, Greg Ostertag roasted Tim Duncan in Tim Duncan's first Rocky Mountain review.
Yeah.
Because Tim Duncan had never played in the NBA before, and Otag was in year 1 or 2.
Yeah, so he'd been through the wars, as they like to call
He'd done it.
Yeah.
And had actually a really good rookie season. We kind of dunk on Otag a lot, but he had a really good rookie season. It's part of why he ended up getting his big contract. You should be able to beat up a lot of those guys. Now, ironically, I bet you the age gap between Zach Edey. Let me pull this up really quick. And Walker.
Pretty close.
I bet Walker's, was he 24, 22? Let me see. Walker is, they're 20. Walker and Edey are both 22 years old. Walker was born in July.
Okay.
Oh, man.
Is Edey
Zach
older?
Edey's 2 months older than Walker
Oh,
Kessler.
my gosh. Yeah.
Zach Edey was born May 14th, 2022. Oh, no. Walker's almost a year older. So Walker's going to turn 23 coming up later this month.
Okay, fair enough.
So he's about 300 days older.
That's the funny thing about this is they're pretty close in age. One's got going into his 3rd year in the NBA. The other one's a rookie.
Yeah. And that's also kind of a red flag. I mean, drafting old guys in the lottery has never really worked out.
Well, and David Locke talks about it all the time. You're talking about guys, full-grown men going up against young players when it comes to the older prospects in the draft. When you're looking at a senior in college and trying to evaluate them, you have to take it and look at, say, who are they playing against? Well, they're playing against 18 and 19-year-olds. Well, a 22, 23-year-old, guess what? They're more developed, they're more advanced, and how much more upside do they actually have? And that's, you always are weighing that when it comes to NBA draft.
In addition to Edey, other familiar names, Dylan Jones is going to make his debut with the Oklahoma City Thunder from Weber State. Jalen Wells, if you're a Pac-12 basketball fan, was at Washington State last year. He's going to make his debut. And then you are going to see Jared McCain from Duke, who was Kyle Filipowski's buddy. And also, well, I know Kyle played 2 years, but Jared McCain, one and done, number 16 overall pick, is going to make his debut here as well as the Jazz rookies. So the Salt Lake City Summer League, a very cool opportunity for pretty cheap. It's like $16.
And it holds a lot of intrigue, more so than a lot of other summer leagues. And I all of them have something, but this one, the teams coming in and also just with the way the Jazz roster is constructed, there's a lot to watch for.
All the games are also going to be on K-Jazz, at least all the Jazz games.
Yeah,
not
and
the
we're
other
airing
teams.
them here on the Zone as well.
We'll have them on the Zone or Jazz Plus. So a real opportunity to watch these. When we come back, Tim LaComb is going to join us. He'll talk about what he's heard about Lauri Markkanen and the Jazz future. Stick around. More Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Who's got it better than us?
Your home for the best sports coverage in Utah. You're listening to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. A very happy Friday to everybody out there. Today, go join Hans Olsen and the KSL Sports Zone as we broadcast live from the Royal Court Pickleball Club, Utah's new state-of-the-art indoor pickleball facility in Harriman. Today, from noon to 3, stop by for prizes, food, and fun. The Royal Court Pickleball Club, in Harriman with Hans Olsen. Let's welcome in our next guest. Longtime assistant coach in the state of Utah. Hear him on Utah Jazz pre-half and post-game shows. Coach Tim LaComb. What's going on, Coach?
Hey, Ben. Good to see you. I understand you got Hatch with you today.
Filling in.
How is my favorite Instagram jam artist doing?
Oh, I'm a little tired today. It was a late night, but I'm well. Well, and it's always nice to see your name pop up. In fact, you did pop up last night.
I did. I tuned in for a little bit. Ben, I don't know if you noticed, he goes on Instagram Live.
Oh, nice.
And Tim just jams out. It's
Absolutely.
fun. It's fun.
Down in the basement.
Yep.
Oh, I know about LaComb's jam sessions. Hey, before we get into the Lauri Markkanen news and the latest, can we go back to the draft a little bit and kind of what you thought the Jazz takeaways were? And you've watched as much college basketball as anybody. We had talked about Cody a little bit throughout the year. We never talked about either Kyle Filipowski or Isaiah Collier. So as these picks happened, what did you think the storyline of the night was for the Jazz and how they approached the draft?
Well, they definitely, in my mind, did a great job. I think everybody would agree with that. You know, most of the pundits think the Jazz may have won the draft in terms of the talent they acquired. But I think the key was they were able to get it without having to move anything. You know, they didn't have to move an asset or a pick. They were able to kind of stand pat, stay where they were. And it really, I was surprised. I didn't think Williams would be there at 10 in many scenarios. And when he was available, you know, I thought that was huge. They were able to get three of those guys. You know, Collier, it's been a well-spun narrative that he was the number one player in the country in 23, coming out before college. And really it's his size and speed, kind of that combination, so intriguing. But the fact that they were able to get him where they did and then, wait that one pick in the second round to get Filipowski, who was their target there. I think it was well done. I've said it along the way, but the ping pong balls were not good to the Jazz. But the draft and the way that it fell, it didn't penalize them. I think that they were able to draft the guys that they probably would have drafted given the ability to move around. So really happy to see that.
Now, Ben and I have kind of been going back and forth on stuff involving Lauri Markkanen and all the rumors involving him and a potential trade. But I think the biggest thing, and I want to get your thought on this, Tim, is Danny Ainge, Justin Zanuck, the brain trust of the Utah Jazz. It appears on paper they have kept every option available to them. Whether they do trade Lauri, they retain him. No matter what they want to do, they have avenues to really move whichever way they want.
Right, and I think I think there was a plan in place to go after some of these free agents. You know, Ben's chronicled the Bridges. That the attempt there when that thing went to 5 draft picks. You know, the Jazz had a line in the sand that they weren't going to move from, and I think that's just prudent business. You can't get too hungry, but I think they did make a couple of took a couple chances to go after pieces that made sense. But at this point, the Jazz now are probably looking at offers. There's been chronicled 4 or 5 different teams have approached them with serious offers. But I do think at this point that the Jazz, barring something that just that they just can't pass up. I think the Jazz are probably in a place where we're going to have Lauri in the fold, a bunch of young guys around him, and approach it that way. Obviously, a couple other moves could still be made, but I think we're not completely out of the woods, but I think the Lauri thing would have to be something that, Justin would see, and Danny would see and say, there's just no way we can turn that down. And I just don't know that that's out there. I don't know that a team's going to be willing to do that much.
Yeah, I guess one of my big questions here, and this is the question everyone is asking themselves that's trying to acquire Lauri. Are they Lauri away from being something significantly different? And Lauri's an amazing player. I don't know if what you have to give up from Golden State to get Lauri back puts you into contention. How many teams out there do you think are Lauri away from being the favorites to win a title that couldn't make that argument already without him?
I think you're right. And really, you look at the two teams that are probably the most intriguing from a personnel standpoint. It's been rumored that Kuminga's really making big moves and starting to get better. He's a young guy. Obviously came up the G League route, but he's kind of had a little bit of a jump here. And I think Podziemski is the other guy who I love on their team. So are they willing to move those two really good young pieces and a whole slew of picks for a guy who obviously is going to bring so much, but is it going to be that much more than what those guys are giving you now? Same kind of thing can be said in Oklahoma City. I mean, if you're going to do a deal and it's got to blow your hair back, Jalen Williams has got to be involved in that deal. If you're dealing with OKC, and I just can't imagine them being willing to mortgage that really shining star. I think he might be one of the next 3-4 guys that just hits, the scene hard. And so I think that's what the Jazz are trying to, if they're going to give up Lauri, they've got to get something like that in return. And to your point, I just don't know if teams are going to be willing to do that. And not that Lauri's not worth it, but does it make that big a difference? And I think that's where everybody's at right now.
Looking at what the Jazz, I get intrigued by what the Jazz front office may be considering doing here, Tim, because DJ says this, I agree with him on it, that Lauri may be good enough to keep you in a spot where it comes to the NBA draft where you don't want to be, essentially in the middle of the bottom part of the lottery, whereas in the case of this upcoming draft, maybe the upcoming 2 drafts, you'd like to be near the top. So how do you weigh that? How do you figure out which way to go?
Well, I mean, it's the old adage of, being able to do that and maintaining culture. But the one thing I do know about young players, they have great intentions.
Sure.
But there's a major learning curve. Young players definitely are going to lose, their share of games because of the fact that they are on a learning curve. And so really it would be a management thing at that point. I just believe that this can't be, you just can't force this. It can't happen. You can't necessarily manufacture it. The key is the Jazz have a slew of talent, in my opinion. I think they got a slew of young talent after the last 2 drafts, with more to come. And then obviously the ability to move around with picks. The narrative hasn't necessarily changed. It's just everybody's timeline here is, everybody's on the edge of how many more years can we go through this. But to me, it's the end game. It's looking down the road and understanding they're trying to do something here in Utah that's never been done. And so they're trying to go about it a little bit differently. And it's not easy, I will tell you that. It's not easy because even if you tank perfectly, and we watched that this year, you got a 14% chance. That's not great. And so I do hear the narrative often that people are confused with the Jazz plan. And the plan is only as good as your environment. Like this offseason, they're hoping maybe somebody would get tired of a really good player and be wanting to move them, and the Jazz could get involved. But as we saw, those things didn't line up. So you've got to be ready to strike, but you can't be too overbearing because, these moves, obviously you've only got so many of them, and you got to be really smart about what you do.
All right, I'm going to put my David Locke cap on.
Ooh, this should be fun.
Oh, boy.
I'm going to read you some numbers.
You're going to raise your decibel then.
Yeah.
I was in there in the studio, and he hurt my ears.
I won't yell at you. I'm going to read you some numbers, though, real quick. Here's the only players since 2015 who have averaged over 20 points, 5 assists, and 2 rebounds. So 25 and 2. Shot better than 50% from the floor and better than 40% from the free throw line. Only 5 guys have done it. LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Kevin Durant, who's done it 4 times, and Steph Curry. If you add in 85% from the free throw line, so 50, 40, 85 on 20 points per game, 5 assists, and 2 rebounds, over solely a 50-game stretch since 2015, just 50 games, not an entire season, Kawhi Leonard, Nikola Jokic, Kyrie Irving, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and Jimmy Butler since 2015 are the only players who ever had a 50-game stretch like that. And there's one more name, and they play for the Utah Jazz, and who do you think that is?
Man.
25 and 2, shooting 50, 40, and 85 for at least 50 straight games.
Is it Lauri?
It's Colin Sexton.
I was going to say Sexton, but I didn't trust myself.
Well, I was like, there's 2 names in my mind. It was Lowry and Collins. There you go. Yeah.
Well,
the guys who have done it are Kawhi, Jokic, Kyrie, Shai, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and Jimmy Butler. Like, Coach, we're talking about the best players in the NBA who have done this, and not all stats are identical, nor does it indicate that you're going to be, an MVP candidate. But I really think we're sleeping on how good Colin Sexton was once he got inserted into the starting lineup last year.
I 100% agree. I mean, I was calling that out all year. That it was, the bottom line is Colin got here, and he really worked on himself. And, he's always had that ability to go by people, but we watched in the first year him get into spots where he got stuck. And this year kind of just watched it happen. His awareness, he still has that burst and the ability to really get where he wants to go. But Will has done a great job of unlocking some pieces of Colin's game. And I agree with you, Ben. I think we're definitely sleeping on him. I mean, he had just an incredible transcendence in a lot of ways.
Yep.
Not that the guy was bad, but I've always believed you can slow somebody down, but you can't speed them up. And Colin came here with the mindset that he's going to just go. And just those little things, I think, from a development standpoint, all the time he spent on reads and ball screens, it's opened up the game for him. And I'm with you. He's still a really young guy. When you consider that, Keontae was one of those rookies last year, and he's going to have year 2. I mean, I don't think that this is gloom and doom by any stretch, but Colin Sexton, man, I'm with you. He's playing his way into a different level, and he did that last year. I hope he can continue it. I would think with his work ethic, the sky's the limit, but that's a great call out. It's really impressive, those numbers.
So when I look at the questions about the Jazz's future and how you get a second star next to Lauri, my first thought is, honestly, he might be here, and it might be Colin Sexton. And maybe you run it back with Colin and Lauri, and if you only win 40 or 35 games or 32 games last year and you end up another top 10 pick in next year's draft, maybe you do get lucky and you get that 14% and you get Cooper Flagg or whatever, the 5% to move up to get number 1 like Atlanta was able to do, and you get one of these guys. But, if you totally hit the reset button, you might be losing a lot more than just Lauri Markkanen. And some of the start, you may be closer than to one piece away in a Mikal Bridges type trade to really having a good big 3 with all of these young players and draft picks you still have on your roster.
Amen to that. And I really do think that that's at least from where I sit, I think that that's, if you want a path or a plan that's outside of, the big game hunting tag, that everybody wanted to associate with. I mean, there was a sentence after that, and you don't go big game hunting and hit every single time. And so, if you don't hit, you've got to Reconurgle, and I think that is probably the answer. I've always wondered too. Lauri's such a versatile guy, and he's so non-ball dominant that it's almost as if Colin and he could be. You add one more piece to those guys, and you've got a big three. So yeah, I'm with you. There's a lot of development still to go, but the last year that was a really big thing that happened in and around all of the noise, and it did not get its proper due.
All right, Tim, I want to look ahead to Summer League upcoming. Obviously, the Salt Lake City Summer League, and then they'll be down in Vegas as well. But Ben and I were just talking about the Jazz Summer League roster is just filled with names. Like, we're talking players from the last 3 draft classes, multiple guys who are on two-way deals, have NBA experience. What are you going to be looking for in Summer League?
Well, they do have, in my mind, they have a world champion Summer League team. Because I was looking at it, I was like, holy cow, they got everything on that team that you need. But that's my point exactly, is most of those guys are guys they've gone out and picked and are under contract. Usually you're scrambling to fill your Summer League team. And that's the phase. But I remember when OKC would roll through here with a dominant Summer League team, and I think it's part of the process. And so the biggest thing that can happen this summer is that 2 things, I guess, is the young guys can understand what this is going to look like. Not necessarily the exact momentum and speed, because the stars of the league aren't playing, but to be out there and understand it and what it requires. And then number 2, the chemistry. I mean, that's going to be massive here to get all these guys kind of on the same page. I've been really impressed with the Jazz as an organization, and it's, part of it's having the G League team here in town, but the meshing, when you go watch a Stars game and the stuff they run, is akin to what the Jazz are doing. And so it really is like Taylor Hendricks spent 35 minutes a night over there for a majority of the season, just getting reps, and it's so valuable. So this summer is about reps. It's about getting understanding, and it's about gelling, so that when training camp comes, you got a bunch of guys who are at least a little bit more prepared and can hit the ground running. But if they don't win a Summer League title, whoever's coaching that team should be looked at very seriously.
Sean Sheldon, your job's on the line here, buddy.
Yeah. No, but it's a loaded group, and it does speak to something I said when Ainge first came here. He understands talent. And he understands, talent that can really go at a high level. And that's what we got out of this last draft. Cody Williams, Collier, and Filipowski, those guys, they've played on the biggest courts all of their life. You go to an AAU event at 15, and there's one court that everybody's packed around. These guys have been playing on that court. They've felt that pressure. Now it's time to take that next step. But that is a showroom filled with very, very potent automobiles, no doubt about it. Each and every one of those guys has unique talent, and I'm excited to watch them play together.
Cool story that came out last night. I don't know if you'd seen it. Brandon Carlson lands a 2-way deal with the Raptors.
I did.
I know he'd gotten invited to camp. I didn't know he was going to get a 2-way deal. That's a pretty premier spot. There's only 150 of those in the NBA, which seems like a lot. It's not a lot. Those are hard jobs to get. Good for Brandon Carlson.
Well, couldn't come for a better kid. I had the opportunity to recruit Brandon while I was at BYU, and when we started to recruit him, I went in and we were recruiting Yoli Childs, and he was the backup center to Yoli. And when I'd go watch, it's like, who's that young kid that's just running everywhere, blocking everything? So we started getting involved with him before he even started a game. He ended up going to Utah, told us to take a hike. But the cool part about it is we maintained a great relationship. His mom and dad are great people, and it's an awesome family. So I'm so happy to see that for him. He definitely worked really hard. He's the oldest dude available in the draft this year at 25. So, but I think that's a great fit too. I think Toronto seems like a place that would definitely appreciate his strengths.
And go get tutored by Kelly Olynyk, which honestly, if he makes it in the NBA, he's got some of that big guy who can step out and shoot some threes and hopefully do a little bit more with the ball in his hands.
facilitate a little bit. Kelly's got to teach him that high elbow trick, and
so hit somebody in the face with your elbow.
Yeah, just
right.
taking dudes out, clear
and then be like, "Sorry, man, I didn't see you there."
Yes, that's the move he needs to learn. Yes.
Hey, Coach, enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend. Appreciate you jumping on a Friday.
Yeah, it was so good to be with you. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
See you on IG Live. All right,
Coach Tim LaComb.
Okay, man.
Giving us a breakdown on the latest with the Utah Jazz, and I think he's exactly right. Again, I was, I do my mailbag, and we do our podcast every Tuesday, and I answer the mailbag. And someone asked, who's the next first-time All-Star for the Utah Jazz? And I think you just kind of naturally go to Cody Williams.
It's one of these young
Taylor
bucks,
Hendricks.
yeah.
It's like, man, Colin is really, really good. Like, he's really, really good. He's if Keontae George ends up as good as Colin Sexton, you've hit a home run.
Yeah, absolutely.
With the 16th overall pick. Again, Colin was a top 10 pick. So if Keontae were to get that good, you've really outdrafted the positioning. But man, Colin's 24, 25 years old. Like, and if he's 25, he's a young 25. There's really no reason I've seen why you don't think he should be a major long-term part of this process. And
sure.
Maybe the face, he and Lauri are the face, and the rest of these guys you try and use to find the third piece that steps in, and then the young guys all step up and just fill in the gaps around him.
Well, the thing about Colin is I just love his attitude. He's got an effervescent personality, and he's never really down, if that makes sense.
Yep.
He's always looking to be better, to improve, but he has always got a positive outlook on this, and you can tell he absolutely loves the game of basketball.
He's a junkie. He's a basketball junkie.
He's a hooper.
He's a psycho.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It was the end of the end of the season, and he was doing his postseason recap, and somebody, was it Danny was saying that? No, it was Will. Will Hardy said, "I get here in the mornings," and Will gets there pretty early.
Yeah.
And he's out there on the court doing multiple workouts before anybody else is in the building. Like, he is as driven as anybody, and it'd be cool to see him have that pay off in a big way.
Yep, and he's close. He's also going to be extension eligible next year because he's got 2 years left on his deal. Again, it's just a smoking price tag. It's just unbelievable how cheap the Jazz ended up getting him for.
That 4-year deal they got, was absolutely incredible. In retrospect, especially.
And that he's come back from his knee injury. We'll see. I'm very curious to watch, assuming Colin's on the roster next year and Lowry's on the roster next year. If you are Cooper Flag or bust, those two being together might make you too good, in all honesty.
That would push you towards the back end of the lottery again, probably.
But if you lose all the veterans around him and you just play young guys, maybe those guys can carry you to 31 wins and you get your Cooper Flag or whoever, and then you're really off and running. But we'll see. I think Colin's a pretty special player. All right, when we come back, we will talk some of the latest with Lauri Markkanen. Then from a national perspective, Keith Smith will join us. Stick around. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Whether it's the Jazz, Utes, Cougars, or Aggies, these guys have got you covered.
Time to eat, fellas.
You're locked on to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson.
1, 2, 3, move it.
On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Very happy Friday to everybody out there. You had a wonderful holiday. Let's welcome in our next guest. You can read him at Spotrac and find him on the Front Office Show. Find him on Twitter at Keith Smith NBA. Keith, what do you call it? Spotrac? Do you call it Spotrac? What is it? What am I talking about here? I'm on the website every day.
Yeah, if I had $1 every time someone asked me, I probably could just retire. It's take the word spot and the word track and smush them together. Spotrac.
Spotrac.
Okay.
That's very good to know. Because I was using it. I do. I use it every day, and every time I write an article involving a contract, I look at your work. So I appreciate all the work you do because it really, truly makes my life a lot easier. Let's talk Lauri Markkanen. He is the name that is most circulating in NBA circles right now as far as availability and as far as a real needle mover who could still be moved this offseason. What's the latest you've heard with Lauri? Is it just the same 4 teams that seem to be knocking on the Jazz's door, hoping to get the former All-Star out of Salt Lake City?
Yeah, it seems to be the same teams that are interested. I've heard, maybe the Miami Heat are having some interest, but that, anytime any kind of player of any known value, just put the Heat and the Lakers on the list because they're going to ask, because that's just how the NBA works. But other than that, I've heard the Spurs and the Warriors. People are starting. I think speculation's now getting a little reckless because I've seen some people say, well, why wouldn't the Pelicans go for him? Or why wouldn't all these other teams? So I think it's more just we're starting to get to, all right, nothing's happened, so now let's start looking. But I also have been told that the Jazz are very open to, hey, if we don't get the right offer, we're not moving them. We have no reason to move them, and they can still do the renegotiation and extension. That can happen in roughly a month from now. And then from there, it would turn into, all right, well, where are we kind of going with this moving forward with Lauri Markkanen? And then that's where I think Utah is keeping all their options open and all their flexibility open with him and other players on the roster.
Keith, can you give us some insight into Danny Ainge's reputation among NBA executives? Because we obviously work here with close alongside the Utah Jazz, but can you give us a kind of national perspective on how he's perceived?
Yeah, having covered him for a long time in Boston when I used to cover the Celtics, one of the articles I wrote once was, what is it like to really talk trade with Danny Ainge? One of the things that came up was you got kind of mixed opinion where some people are like, you feel like you're done, and then there's always like one more thing he wants to get out of you in a trade. And then other people said, I enjoy it because he'll tell you straight out, not interested in anything you have to offer, like not for this player at least. So he's very upfront as far as that goes, but it seems like he drives a hard bargain. Not that he needs to win trades. I think that gets a little misconstrued. I think what it more is he wants to make sure that for years it was the Celtics, and now with the Jazz, he wants to make sure that they come out in a really good place where it fits whatever direction he's moving in. I think one of his best skills is he is not married to anything until the team is fully like all in one way. Like right now, I've seen a lot of like, well, if the Jazz did X, Y, and Z, they could chase a playoff spot. Danny Ainge isn't interested in chasing playoff spots. He wants to win. And if he thinks the best way to win at some point is to take major steps backwards first, collect even more draft capital, go into this, these next couple of drafts with, great talent coming in and have a lot of bites at that apple, he's going to go that direction, even if that means some short-term pain in coming years here before they start building it back up.
What's the value this summer of being the last team standing? Because, Detroit still has some money and Philly's figuring out their final moves. And there's a couple teams that have some flexibility, but the Jazz have over $35 million. A lot of that will be held on to an earmark just to give to Lauri if they get to August 6th and renegotiate and extend him. But is there value to being the last team with cap flexibility this year?
Yeah, absolutely, because what we're seeing now is, no disrespect meant to any of the players that are still on the market as free agents, but a lot of those guys are outside of DeMar DeRozan. They're exception kind of guys. They are guys who you're going to sign for the MLE, or you're going to sign them to a minimum type deal and those kind of things. So what teams have shifted into really over the last day or so is let's start looking at trades. And what the Jazz benefit is let's just say Brandon Ingram was going to be traded from the Pelicans, but the Pelicans are like, I don't really want the contracts back that they have to send us. Danny Ainge can, hold a hand up and say, hey, we're over here like the Statue of Liberty. Bring us your tired, you're hungry, you're poor, you're back contracts. Just send a draft pick with them.
Well, and I guess that's the whole analogy summed up in one nice sentence. I like that. But looking at the Jazz philosophically, they have made 3 draft picks in each of the past 2 drafts, and the perception is that the 2025 and then the 2026 drafts upcoming might be 2 of the deeper ones in recent memory. So what do you think philosophically the Jazz should be looking at here? Should they be looking at hopefully 1, 2, 3 of these 6 pan out? What do you think they should be looking at?
Yeah, I think what you're trying to do right now is it's just a volume play of let's just keep trying to get good players in here, and eventually 1 or 2 of them will really pop. I'm still pretty high on all the guys they picked last year. I think Keontae George did quite a bit to show that he can be a real player in the NBA. And then I think I still like Taylor Hendricks a lot. I'm based in Orlando, so I get to see him play a lot at UCF. And I think he's going to be a good player eventually. And I'm super high on their draft. Their draft was one of my favorites of any team. I love Cody Williams. I had him as a top 10 guy, so I think they did really well to get him there. Isaiah Collier was the kid who was in the mix for the number 1 pick. That's something Danny Ainge is very known for. He got very known for in Boston was taking guys who were former high-end recruits and maybe due to a weird situation in college didn't fully pan out. Then he got him and got a lot of success with those kinds of players over the years. And then getting Kyle Filipowski in the second round is a massive win. So all around, yeah, I think they're doing pretty good with that. Now, what you would like to do, excuse me, is maybe add a little bit more draft capital to put yourself in position to, in 2025, Cooper Flagg's a name like I think everybody knows because he's been kind of put in front of us for a long time. But you've got guys like Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper and VJ Edgecombe, who's playing in the qualifiers for the Bahamas right now to the Olympics and really playing well. Those guys are all going to come in next year, and those guys are going to be great. And then the year after that, you got Cam Boozer and AJ DeBonsa. You've got a lot of talent flowing in, and I think the Jazz wouldn't mind being near the top of the draft board each of the next couple seasons.
Keith, what do you think is next in NBA free agency outside of the Jazz? I mean, you've mentioned DeMar DeRozan is kind of the last true free agent needle mover. Maybe Tyus Jones is somebody who could help the right team, but are we mostly done? Is free agency wrapped up before the 4th of July? I know today's the 5th, but there wasn't a lot of action yesterday either.
Yeah, I think we're getting close on the free agent part of it. So I think the next thing is going to be trades because there's a lot of guys out there in trade. We talked through some of them obviously with the Jazz, but Brandon Ingram has still been heavily mentioned out there. Bruce Brown in Toronto is somebody who's known to be available. We've got there's just those guys. We still don't have full clarity on exactly what's going on with Darius Garland in Cleveland. It seems like that's kind of gone away with the whole if Mitchell extends, he wants out. That's now seemingly not coming back around. So I'm guessing maybe that storyline either they got past it or it was overblown to begin with. So, yeah, we're in a spot where right now we're looking towards the trade market with a handful of guys. There's still a lot of good free agents that can help teams, but they're more like, all right, we need a wing for our bench, go get player X. They're going to be targeted types of signings versus the true blockbusters. Those are all basically done at this point.
What team or teams do you think won in free agency so far?
I think Oklahoma City did really, really well. I think when you combine, if you put the Alex Caruso acquisition in there, I think that was big. And then getting Isaiah Hartenstein is huge. What that does is that gives them an ability to play different ways. Last year, they were pretty much married to, we're going to play small ball around a perimeter-based 5. Now, this year, if they want to, against Denver or against Minnesota and some of the bigger teams, they can put Hartenstein out there and still play Holmgren. And it's funny because I got pushback from some people that were like, well, what made them so special was Holmgren at the 5. Well, he can still do that. They didn't lose that ability. Nothing says Hartenstein has to play 40 minutes a night. This isn't New York anymore. He doesn't have to play that much under Tibbs. He can actually rest once in a while. So I thought they did really, really well. I think Orlando getting Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was a huge get for them, just kind of gives them another shooter on the wing. That backcourt defense with him and Jalen Suggs is going to be really, really good. Philly is hard to overlook. New York, they both improved with getting Bridges and then getting Paul George, even if, for New York, they paid a heavy price to get him. But for right now, moving forward, they close the gap at least a little bit on Boston at the top of the East.
Keith, terrific stuff as always. Again, we appreciate your work at Spotrac. Terrific stuff. We'll continue to read you throughout free agency and beyond. Thanks for jumping on.
I appreciate you nailed the pronunciation. Well done.
It took me a couple tries, but I got there. Keith Smith, though, that's an easy one. I can nail that name every time. Thanks, Keith.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
There he is, Keith Smith, giving us a breakdown on everything with the NBA and truly one of the must-follows in the league who both understands the contract minutia as well as anybody because the CBA is a nightmare and it's so difficult to understand.
Anybody who can dumb that down and make me understand it is a savant.
Yeah, it's he's good at it. He's very good at it. And then on top of it, he understands why things in the NBA work. Some guys are like exclusively capped guys,
Sure,
and don't really understand, like don't have a feel for players in the league. Keith is probably the best of both worlds. So Keith Smith NBA on Twitter. Read him at Spotrac. Really, really good stuff from Keith. And anytime you're looking for like, when's a guarantee date on a contract? What type? What are the details? Is this guy player option? What does the player option mean? How much is guaranteed, etc. Really good stuff.
And
there.
when you're trying to get a feel for like, okay, what are the ramifications? What does it do for the salary cap? It's got all that for you.
All right, we'll wrap up the show. Coming up next, stick around. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
The sports you love, the teams you can't live without.
Get a sense of urgency!
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Two amigos on the airways, talking sports. They got it made, Jake's and also loves his tie-dye. Ben's got style with his scarf. Oh my. From the islands to the basketball courts, they may be engaging their thoughts. Jake's got wisdom beyond his years.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Brought to you by our friends at Peach Doors and Windows. Go check them out in Salt Lake City or find them online, peachbuildingproducts.com. Go in the showroom 6 days a week, including Saturdays. So walk on in, talk to Cindy, see what you can customize for your house, and then they will send a contractor out to your home to give you some ideas. Maybe you don't see it in the showroom. They have lots of options that they can hook you up with.
All right. Do you like confusing names in sports, Ben?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so this goes to the college realm, like IUPUI, Indiana University, Indianapolis, Purdue, whatever.
Yeah.
So Texas A&M Commerce, they're a Division II program. They have just rebranded themselves as now Texas A&M Dallas at Commerce.
TAMDAC.
Like, what is going on?
Well, you could take out that second A because it's just at,
Yeah.
right?
No, I keep it in.
Okay.
Why not?
And apparently
Yeah.
in Texas, there's another one called University of Houston Victoria at Katy. How
Okay.
many different locations can you put in one university's name?
Well,
HVAC.
it's all the UC things, right? Like UC Davis, UC
Yeah.
Santa Barbara.
But not even. But yeah, there's Cal State Dominguez Hills and everything.
Yeah.
But that one's Texas A&M Commerce. It's Texas A&M Dallas at Commerce. Jeez. Okay. Here we go.
They're
Anyways.
proud of where they're from. Yeah. Hey, we didn't carry it, but Mikhail Sergachev being announced today before the scrimmage. Mikhail Sergachev, again, is one of these guys who there's just been so much going on in sports locally for the last couple of weeks. It's like, that's the biggest acquisition we've had in the state as far as talent goes. Yegor Danim. How are we saying his last name?
So
I've heard Gyeoman. I've heard a lot of things.
We had Travis Hansen on. Travis sat in the meeting with his family.
Okay.
Travis says it's Yegor Denim, like as in denim jeans.
Okay.
And I had two other people who speak Russian tell me that's how it's supposed to be pronounced.
Then we'll go with Yegor Denim.
Yeah.
Cannon Catchings.
Yes.
Cody Williams. Isaiah Collier. Truthfully, if you're talking sports, the single Kevin Young, the actual biggest impact we're going to have is Mikhail Sergachev joining the Utah Hockey Club.
Yeah.
And coming up, in addition to we added a hockey team, but
sure,
Mikhail
but
Sergachev
I think
coming up is a huge difference maker.
We get in our heads, and I'm guilty of this. I keep thinking about stuff that the Utah Hockey Club are doing almost it's like a minor league sense. Does that make sense? Sergachev, he's a legit frontline star player in the National Hockey League. And for some reason in my mind initially, I was kind of like, oh, that's a fun. No, he is. You're right. He is as big a signing as anybody the Utah Jazz could have signed this.
It would be
offseason.
like if you had acquired Mikhail Bridges. I think that really is his comp in hockey as far as a defender who is a borderline all-star, who's kind of was always an up-and-coming star that you're waiting to break through and maybe never became a superstar.
Yeah.
But is like, he's a huge difference maker. He's a legit number one piece at his position. So getting announced today, and then, of course, the doors are going to open at the Delta Center coming up in about 10 minutes for free to fans, and then at 1 o'clock, the hockey scrimmage.
Yeah, should be a fun day. I'm excited for it. I'm going to wander over there and wander around. So if you see me, say what up. I'd love to. I just want to see it. I want to see this team on ice, even if it's the young guys. But a chance to see TJ Ginla. Like there's a legitimate chance you don't see him actually playing for the Utah Hockey Club for 2 or 3
couple
years.
years. Yep.
So getting a chance to see him in his first action, and the fact that he's the son of an NHL Hall of Famer. I knew the name Jerome Ginla just from being around sports.
Yeah.
And so it's cool that considered that's happening. So yeah, it'd be really fun to have this. I still am baffled at how they're going to pull this off, quite frankly, in terms of the upcoming season, Ben, because they have such a compressed timeline to get it done. But they're working feverishly over there, as I understand it.
Pretty cool. You can go to the Utah Hockey Club Twitter account and see the young players stepping out there, and the boards are up. So, obviously you've got the ice, but now you've got the boards as well, and they've all got their phones out, and they're taking pictures, and they're excited. I mean, these guys are excited to be here again.
Well, and they went to the RSL match Wednesday night.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, Lamoureux was having the time of his life. They had him mic'd up.
But, like, Mikhail's here. You know, like, a lot of these guys are here. Clayton Keller's here. Apparently he was over at the practice facility for the Jazz the other day. Like, the guys are around. Everyone's migrating to Salt Lake City, establishing their homes, probably leave again for a vacation, but I think they're here supporting the young kids as well.
That's cool to see. There's a picture of just outside the Delta Center right now. So crowds are starting to show.
It's cool. And then next week, we've got the Salt Lake City Summer League. So
Big 12 Media Days, we've had a busy summer.
Coming off of an NBA draft and a hockey draft, and then we will see what happens with free agency the rest of the way. But it's been an amazing summer. This is a summer for the history books. And if there was more local representation in the Olympics, maybe we talk about it even more. And there's still some. I mean, BYU's got a couple of athletes competing in the Summer Olympics. No Jazz players. At least that doesn't seem like there's going to be any Jazz players. There's a very outside chance Lauri Markkanen could make it, but not going to happen.
Yeah, it's. Yeah, I just don't see that. It'd be an outside chance, but we'll see. The best part about this is we get to kind of sit back and just watch it all go down.
Yeah, it's fun. It's been really enjoyable. It's been a busy summer, and it's really only getting started with, like you mentioned, Big 12 Media Days and all the things we're looking forward to with college football, which is right around the corner.
Going to be really, really hot in Las Vegas.
Hans Olsen is coming up next. He is live at the Utah Royal pickleball courts.
Yes, Royal Court pickleball, right?
Of Utah in Harriman. Coming up next, go down, check them out. Prizes, games.
Play pickleball.
Hanging out with Hans Olsen. That's coming up next. Happy weekend. Hope everyone has a safe and enjoyable weekend. Stick around. More coming up next. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.